There's nothing that a wise teacher or guru can do to develop your intellect. You've got to do it. We are back talking dat Vedankadonk on the Daily Vedantic. And today we're going to go back into the annals of history. And we're going to talk about Socrates, the man, the myth, the ledge. Socrates, more commonly known as Socrates. That's a Bill and Ted's reference, by the way, one of the greatest historical documentaries humans have come up with. Socrates, who lived about 400 BC, one of the earliest philosophers in the West, and he had a hero in Pythagoras. Pythagoras, some people think he spent up to a decade in the Indus Valley in India. Pythagoras did, before bringing wisdom back on the philosophical Silk Road to Greece. That is not, we don't know that for sure, by the way, but the trade routes were extremely well established at that point in the 5th century BC, going into the 4th century. Socrates, who loved Pythagoras, but their lives did not overlap, so they did not know one another. Socrates was this amazing synthesizer between the pre-Socratic philosophers, the sophists, and the natural philosophers. Those are two different schools. And he was a great synthesizer of essentially the head and the heart. In Vedantic terms, it would be the intellect and the mind. The power to discern, analyze, to see clearly, and the power to feel fully. As Swami will say often, we must be a conference of the head and the heart, because you must feel to understand, and you must understand what you feel. Beautiful articulation to synthesize the two and not over-rotate towards one or the other. The reason Socrates comes up in this episode, in addition to I've mentioned the allegory of the cave being a perfect exposition of Vedantic philosophy. And I don't know if it was influenced by it, and it might be more beautiful, as a friend of mine, Dr. John Vervaeke, told me once, it might be more beautiful that these pillars of truth rise on their own, rather than influenced by each other throughout human history. But the allegory of the cave is perfect analogy of what the Vedas were saying, the Upanishads were saying centuries before Socrates gave us the allegory of the cave. The synopsis there being that the mass of people looking at shadows on the cave wall, thinking that is truth, thinking that they are real, that these mere two-dimensional shadows was reality, is contrasted by the person that is let go of their chains, ascends. So it's very important that in the allegory, there is an ascension, anagage, an ascension to an opening where they see light. They're blinded by the light. They're actually disoriented by what they see. And they see three-dimensional figures. Cannot believe it. But they also can't unsee it. They come down to where everybody is still seeing the shadows, proclaiming there's something of higher dimension. There is a reality, an illumination, waiting for everyone that is willing to ascend. And not only do people not believe that person, but they want to kill them. It's an often forgotten part of the allegory of the cave. It's a person that has seen reality, that's coming back to tell everyone, is not met with rejoice or celebration, but quite the opposite. People want to kill that person. Which is so sadly true throughout human history of truth sayers, from Socrates to you have Christ, you have Galileo, you have a number of people in the West where when they bring us truth, they are not celebrated. That's a massive understatement, sadly. But what I find most interesting about Socrates these days is that he considered himself a midwife. I didn't really have an appreciation for this term, this orientation that he had with his role in humanity until recently. And I can't stop thinking about it lately. The distinction being that he did not consider himself to be a parental figure giving you birth, granting you birth towards reality. Talk about a cave to come out of and see things for the very first time, by the way. But he did not see himself as a mother giving birth. He specifically claimed the role of midwife to help you give birth to yourself. A rebirth. To be born again, born anew. It's an interesting framing for a philosophical titan. Essentially, they'll guide you, but they're not going to do any of the work for you. They can't do any of the work for you. It's like a trainer. There's nothing they can do for you to get your muscles directly, for them to directly get your muscles any stronger. You've got to do it. Same as for developing the intellect. There's nothing that a wise teacher or guru can do to develop your intellect. You've got to do it. They can indirectly give you a path. And how friggin' valuable is that if they're able to give you the simplest methodology? But ultimately, it's completely up to you. And lately, I've just found it fascinating that he distinctly saw himself as a midwife that could guide and coach, but ultimately has no direct participation in you giving birth to yourself. And maybe this doesn't have a whole lot of weight to it when you hear it for the first time. It did not have that much weight to it. I did not have much appreciation for this concept, this role that he saw himself in, the maximal role that he could be, because he saw that he could not be directly participatory in one's realization or revelation of reality versus the shadows that we're all convinced are real. But the best guides are both encouraging and realistic. Maybe this is a powerful, profound reality to our own development, that no one can do it for us. And we can be epically grateful for the midwives, the guides, the teachers around us. But ultimately, it's completely on our shoulders to develop ourselves to the point where we can, in Socrates' world, where we can see reality. And if you're lucky enough to have a great midwife, a great guide along the way, encouraging you each step, again, that's a powerful, powerful role. Incredibly powerful role in the grand equation. But ultimately, they can't take away any of the pain, and they can't directly participate in any of the development. They're just there to encourage us on the way. That's today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.